Oh! Hey film fans, today I'll be reviewing the 1998 film A Simple Plan, which was directed by Sam Raimi and released on 4K UHD by Arrow Video. This is a director-approved limited edition and it just came out. The packaging is quite nice. It includes an illustrated collector's booklet, which has an essay by Bill Jabiri, an excerpt from John Kenneth Mears' book, The Unseen Force, The Films of Sam Raimi, and some notes about Arrow's restoration. Sadly, it doesn't come with a magnifying glass to read the 3-point type, but I still appreciate the physical collateral. It also includes this reversible sleeve with original and newly commissioned artwork by Matt Griffin. You can see here. And on this side would be, I believe this is the original US one-sheet poster. The artwork, in my opinion, is spectacular. Griffin even managed to match the typeface on the movie's opening credits. It's 1,000 times better than the boring original studio art on the reverse side. The movie itself is from a new 4K master by Arrow Films from the original negative approved by Raimi, and it's in Dolby Vision HDR10 compatible. The result is mostly good, but it does suffer from a lack of detail in some of the wider establishing shots. The sound is not great at all. It includes a DTS HD Master Audio 5.1 surround track and an optional lossless stereo audio track. I believe I watched it in the stereo track, but I don't remember at this point. In either format, the levels are uneven. Most of the regular dialogue is fine, but this film happens to have its fair share of quiet dialogue that, with this master, is almost impossible to hear. So of course you turn it up, but then someone fires a gun or crashes a car and all the lights in your neighborhood start coming on. The extras on this edition are what you come to expect from a boutique label like Arrow. These include 2 brand new audio commentaries, one by critics Glenn Kenny and Farhan Smith-Neem, and the other by production designer Patricia von Brandenstein with filmmaker Justin Beam. Neither was mind-blowing, but von Brandenstein did bring some interesting tidbits about location scouting and what went into creating the overall look. The disc also includes 3 2024 interviews by Arrow Video, one each with actors Becky Ann Baker and Chelsea Ross, and the other with cinematographer Alar Cavillo. They were each less than 10 minutes, but Cavillo does go into some nice detail about how he lit certain shots, and even an anecdote about how they had to use 2 sets of lenses, one for the interiors and one for exteriors, because the frigid temperatures outdoors would cause the lenses to fog up when they moved inside. It would have been nice if he could have had a full commentary or if this interview could have been longer. I'm sure there's a good reason why this didn't happen. Other extras include on-set interviews with Paxton, Thornton, Fonda, Raimi, and producer Jim Jacks, behind-the-scenes footage, and the theatrical trailer. It's worth noting that despite all the effort and expense Arrow put into this release, they did not include resume points or even chapters in the main menu. So if you stop the movie halfway through, it's painstaking to find where you left off. If you've taken the disc out, God forbid, add an extra couple hours to get past the Arrow logo and various disclaimers and copyright info each time you put the disc back in. Personally, I would trade this basic functionality, especially the resume points and the chapters in the main menu, for any or all of the special features they added. Shame on Arrow. A high-end boutique label should do better. Now for the review. As usual, spoilers are coming. Fair or not, I've always compared Sam Raimi's A Simple Plan to Joel and Ethan Coen's Fargo, which came out a couple years earlier and on most days is my favorite film of all time. Perhaps not coincidentally, I've also never cared much for the former, despite good reviews when it came out and a solid reputation still to this day. So when I saw that Arrow Video was releasing a 4K limited edition version of A Simple Plan, I thought it was a great opportunity to reassess it out of concern I'd never given it a fair shake. The underlying genius that really tied Fargo together is that, as heavily plotted as it is, it's still driven by the characters. Consider them. Jerry Lundegaard is in over his head, desperate and consumed by greed. His father-in-law, Wade Gustafson, is an old, greedy bastard who has no respect for Jerry. Carl Showalter, one of the thugs Jerry pays to kidnap his wife to swindle the ransom out of Wade, is a small-time crook who can't keep his mouth shut. His partner, Garrett Grimsrud, is an emotionless, mute brute.
Would it kill you to say something?
I did.
Then consider the big turns in Fargo where things go sideways. Sure, getting pulled over with a kidnapped woman tied up in the floor of the back seat could be seen as a writer's contrivance. But not so fast. They were pulled over because they didn't put the temporary tags on the car, because Jerry's an imbecile, Carl is too small time to have that much foresight, and Gare is more muscle than tactician. When we learn about the tags, our reaction isn't surprise, it's, yeah, that tracks. Carl tries to talk his way out of the traffic stop because that's how he does, and only digs their hole even deeper, leaving Gare the psychopath to shoot their way out because that's how he does. The other major complication is much later in the film when Wade insists on bringing the ransom money to the kidnappers himself. With everything we know of Wade at that point, it would have felt wrong if he didn't do it himself. Under no circumstances would he put that much of his own money, not to mention his daughter's life, in Jerry's hands. Both of these turns and everything else in the Coen brothers' masterpiece are driven by the characters, who are clearly and efficiently drawn. What's great about Fargo is that it rolls mercilessly to its inevitable conclusion, but is never predictable, because everything that happens is determined by who these people are. A simple plan, like Fargo, involves ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. Like Fargo, a simple plan takes place in the dead of winter in landscapes smothered by snow. That's where the similarities end. A simple plan never lets the characters take control. Instead, the plotting drives all the action. It's also worth noting that where the weather in Fargo becomes a character unto itself, with details of the winter's burden pervading the picture throughout, in A Simple Plan it's more of an incidental inconvenience. A Simple Plan, simple premise. 3 ordinary small-town folks find themselves by happenstance deep in the woods in a desolate nature preserve where they stumble upon a downed airplane. Inside the plane is a dead pilot, his eyes being eaten out by what looks like a crow or a raven, and a stash of several $millions. After the obligatory, "We better call the police, let's slow down and think this through" exchange, they decide to split up the money. Inevitably, this turns out to be a regrettable decision. It's a writer's wet dream. Come up with a high-concept premise, then throw every obstacle you can think of at the protagonist. The problem is it's a trap.
It's a trap!
As A Simple Plan demonstrates, coming at the story this way makes it too easy to have the plot determine the characters' choices. The 3 men are Hank, Bill Paxton, Jacob, Billy Bob Thornton, and Jacob's best friend Lou, Brent Briscoe, the town drunk. Their fates sealed at this point, screenwriter Scott Smith, adapting his own novel of the same name, wastes no time throwing monkeys into their wrenches. As you may have guessed, these are by way of illogical bad luck and even more illogical bad decisions. The first strike comes almost immediately. The crash site is so remote and secluded that not a soul hears this plane go down, much less finds it themselves. Night falls and the 3 men are counting and divvying their takes out in the open on this desolate country road. The town sheriff has taken a break from jump-starting cars for stranded townsfolk and happens to come upon them in the middle of nowhere. Jacob, a simpleton when it's convenient for the story, happens to mention that they heard a plane having trouble, a leak that will threaten to flatten them later. Things get exponentially worse when Hank gets home and shows his wife Sarah, Bridget Fonda, their new windfall. When she gets over her initial elated shock, she insists that they're happy enough right now and under no circumstances should they keep the money. This principled stand doesn't last the night, however, as she awakens with the first of many bad ideas. They should return some of the money, the idea being that when someone else eventually finds the plane and sees the partial stash, they of course won't know it's a fraction of the take, and they'll assume that they're the first ones to find it. When Hank and Jacob heed her advice the next morning, they happen to come across a farmer whose farm is just down the road but somehow not within earshot of a crashing airplane. That's 2 fate-altering run-ins on this desolate road for anyone counting. Nevertheless, the 2 brothers instantly become cold-blooded killers. And so it goes for the rest of the film, all the way through to its contrived ending. One dumb idea begets another, leading to distrust, betrayals, and eventually more deaths. It's not all that rewarding to watch a movie where the audience knows better than the characters at every move. Bad choices are far more interesting if they seem like good choices at the time. And perhaps the most pivotal scene, which is frustrating because it's wonderfully layered with subtext, but ultimately sabotaged by the film's loudest flaws, Hank, again at the urging of Sarah, has convinced Jacob to secretly record Lou admitting to the murder of the farmer. Since Lou wasn't even there when Hank and Jacob committed the crime, this far-fetched scheme will entail copious amounts of strategic thinking, alcohol, and Jedi mind tricks.
You don't need to see his identification.
We don't need to see his identification.
This takes place at Lou's house with his wife upstairs. Hank's trying his hardest to wrangle the false confession out of Lou, But it's Jacob who plays 4D chess and gets Lou to spill. Again, Jacob is only simple when the plot calls for it. On the surface, this is one of those scenes that's so well written it could be studied in a writing class or film school, but it doesn't make sense that Jacob could pull this off. This point is driven home moments later when the plot calls for dumb Jacob to return and accidentally reveal the whole scheme to Lou, leading to more murders. As the body count rises, we start to wonder about a simple plan's original concept: ordinary folks corrupted by millions of dollars literally falling out of the sky. If they so easily become cold-blooded killers and are so callous in their growing and numerous cover-ups, then how ordinary were they in the first place? In the first kill, Jacob unexpectedly whacks the farmer over the head with a lug wrench. Thinking he's dead, Hank is dragging the farmer to his eventual makeshift gravesite. When the farmer wakes up and is remarkably lucid, Hank gets on his hands and knees and smothers the farmer with his bare hands. I've had a hard enough time figuring out what to do with a live mouse caught in a trap, much less killing a human being as up close and personal as this. Hank's final kill is too unbelievable to comprehend, especially since a simple thump on the back of the head would have sufficed. The same holds true for the closing shots. The FBI tells Hank that the serial numbers for 1 in every 10 bills is documented. As soon as one is passed, the FBI will be there to pounce like crows circling over a carcass. Hank's solution is to burn the money, all of it. A nice, ironic ending for the writer, but in reality, one could think of a few million alternatives to blowing it all away, especially since they've already lost their souls. It's not all bad. Sam Raimi's direction is tight and mostly dialed down, saving his flair for things like the occasional rack focus. These work because he uses them sparingly. One in particular has Hank trying to ease Jacob's conscience. Jacob in the foreground asks Hank if he ever feels evil. The camera rack focuses back to Hank, whose half-lit face evokes that conflict, then focuses back on Jacob. It's nicely done. Carl, the small-town cop who's smarter than he looks, pulls off the cliché well. When he takes off his glasses to study Hank and his bullshit story, he transforms into someone you don't want to mess with. The most interesting character by far is Sarah. She's a librarian, clearly has more book smarts about crime than experience, and her overthinking is at the root of most of their bad ideas and problems. Fonda is convincing at every turn of her character arc, from innocent housewife who reminds her husband that stealing is bad, to desperately trying to stop him from burning the money. Raimi and Joel and Ethan Coen work closely together in their careers, so it makes sense that they would share sensibilities and even influence each other. Joel Coen did some editing on The Evil Dead, and the three collaborated on the ill-fated 1985 comedy Crime Wave. So the comparisons to Fargo are apt and ripe for the taking. While Raimi had enormous box office success with the Spider-Man franchise and has been a cult favorite for decades, nothing he's done ranks with even the most mid of Coen films. When thinking of A Simple Plan and Fargo head-to-head, it's not even close. It reminds me of Gus Van Sant remaking Psycho. Even when replicating Hitchcock's masterpiece shot for shot, Van Sant's version somehow misses the mark. When you come at the king, you best not miss.
Hey, yo, lesson here, babe. You come at the king, you best not miss.
So those are my thoughts on A Simple Plan. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like. If you enjoy my channel's content, feel free to subscribe. If you want to start a conversation, feel free to drop a comment down below and I'll try to reply to everybody. Otherwise, thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you next time.